this is the trailing edge, and this is the root edge, which is right next to the body tube. So this is right next to the body tube. That's your root edge right there. All right. Tip, leading edge, trailing edge. If you want to take that and make it a little more, rather than a barn door like that, and you want to maybe make it a little thinner, it might help. Right? And every little bit helps off of that. I'll have sandpaper with the balsa wood. You gotta be really careful. Anybody ever dealt with balsa wood?
We did landfill test.
Yeah, a little bit. It doesn't take much, hardly ever, to just, you can almost do it with your finger to do that. We'll use 220 or something like that, some of that. But you should have 3 of these in all good shape. You probably don't even need to sand them. Sometimes the more you sand balsa, the more a rough surface shows up and it gets powdery. And that's where the nose cone's kind of an issue, but we'll have to see with 400 sandpaper or something if that works. All right, there's the fins. Next inside here is this white tube, okay, with a lot of stuff in it. If you pull that stuff out, this here itself is what the engine's going to go in. It's the engine tube, okay? The engines are basically that same size. In this case, if you look at it, wow, what kind of new marks they got on this one. There's about, what, 3 rectangular cylinders in there, kind of, and a little mark in it. Everybody got that?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start with the first one. There's a metal hook in there, and that metal hook is what's going to hold the engine in. The L part of it will go right on there, and it'll sit in there, and it'll look like that eventually. Okay. That's what'll hold the engine in to the thing. The other couple marks are for these 2 black things. These 2 black things will go around the engine tube, and then you'll stuff the engine tube inside the body tube, and you'll glue that in there. And so this really is what is important, to take the engine and touch it to the body tube. Because the engine's going to do the good old Newton's. Per reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The engine's going to go one way, rocket's going to go the other in a way. Okay? So these will eventually just slip onto here and fit right in between there. Okay? They both have a notch on them. I think one is larger than the other, and that will explain that when we get in there, because that's what's going to make room for the shock cord. Okay? But those things will go on there like that. This hook will be in there, and then I didn't want to put it on there, but there's this right here, the engine sleeve. I think they call it, I'm not even sure there's one on here. There might be. Yeah, they call this one the adapter ring. It's just mainly there to hold the the engine hook in place. And the engine hook will fit right inside those when we mess with it, so that's kind of where you're going to line it up as well. And when we get to there, you'll see a little bit more. This would go on the outside of the body tube. But the most important piece of this whole thing is right here. This, what do we call it here, just to make sure? They don't have it on here. All right. This is what will go into the top. And this is what I call the thrust ring. Okay? It's an engine thrust ring. It will put in here, well, it's actually on the top, by the top of the thing. And it stops the engine from going all the way up the body tube. When you light it, it's going to want to go. But then that's what's also action and reaction. The engine's going to really push on that thrust ring, which then going to go on the engine tube, which is then going to go on these engine adapters, and then we're on our way. Okay. So this will be important that that's super glued in correctly as well and nice and tight, or otherwise you might have some issues. That's the engine thrust ring. So we can put all of that stuff with the engine right in there. Now, the recovery system is really what's next. Take all those off. The recovery system has got two parts to it, at least. One is the shock cord. There is a yellow one, which is the Kevlar one, and then there is a white one, which is the elastic band. It's going to get a little tricky tying knots and all these weird things, but you will eventually tie these two together. The yellow one will go all the way down to the engine and be attached to the engine. Sometimes there's a couple different ways to do it. When you see second semester, there'll be a different way of putting it on there. There's actually another eyelet that we screw it into and you tie it into, which makes life a little easier. But this one, you'll have to basically tape it to the engine tube is what's going to happen. Okay? And so, depending upon what we got going on, I'll show you how that works, but you're going to have a knot on this end. You're going to knot these two together. And then this, they'll go all the way through the body tube, and where do you think this is going to go? Right onto that eyelet right there. Okay? And that's the way that works. Now, that keeps the nose cone onto the rocket after it gets blown away, because the next thing is the parachute. Don't open it up. And I wish they would fix this, because this is the worst part of the whole project of building a rocket. It is. It's horrible. They give you a vinyl sheet. You got to cut out this vinyl sheet, and then you actually have to take a really small string and cut it into 3 equal parts and tie it onto that parachute. It's a pain. Right? It takes almost longer to do this than it does to do the other stuff. It's kind of crazy, but when we get to it, we'll look at it. All right? Everybody got all the pieces they need? Everybody got that color parachute? Because it's the most important. It's the coolest color parachute, because if we had any black and gold ones, those are going to burn up. Nobody get any black and gold ones? That's good. All right. I think about 10 minutes. I think we can get some stuff done. Let me...
What are these things? The paper?
That's the... You remember, ever seen those little sticky